exists.
Paul Goldsmith.
Mr. Speaker, my pleasure to stand at the third reading of this bill. It puzzles me following Dr. Clark. I think he has a PhD, I believe. I'm not quite sure what subject it is. But I thought if you had a PhD, you'd expect that there would be some link between evidence and claims.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think the member is being deliberately disrespectful to you in referring to your academic qualifications, but he now has 3 times. And I'm pretty sure you don't have a PhD, sir. I'm not absolutely certain, but I'm pretty sure. But the member's referring to it.
I wasn't offended, but the member ought to be careful with his pronouns and not include the Speaker.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. My apologies, Mr. Speaker, and it may well be that you indeed have a honorary doctorate from somewhere, I'm not sure. But going back to David Clark, the member, so he endlessly says that the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. Well, there is no evidence anywhere to indicate that at all. If you can show us the data, clearly there was a change in the 1980s when the Labour Party was in power, but there's no evidence anywhere that you can point to that since the mid-1990s there has been any difference in terms of income inequality in New Zealand. And please show it down. Rather than keep talking about it, show us the facts, because there aren't any. The second thing is he stands up and says we should have a more progressive tax system. Well, hang on a moment. Is it not progressive as it is at the moment? We've got nearly 70% of income taxpayers in New Zealanders pay a marginal rate of 17.5%, which is not a high tax rate, and a very small group of income taxpayers, about 6% of them, pay around 40% of the income tax, and much more when working for family is taken into account. So why doesn't David Clark just stand up and scream it that he really wants to follow Mr. Hollande's approach of a 75% income tax rate, and that's what he wants. If that's what he wants, why doesn't he just say it and be honest about it? Because if he really thinks that's how New Zealand economy is going to grow, when we should get a real progressive tax system back, why don't you stand up for 75% tax rate? Because that's what the Labour Party wants, and I'm just waiting for them to do it. But this party is clearly out of touch when its leader thinks his reasonably middle-range existence is one that I'm not quite sure what tax rate should be appropriate for his middle-range existence, but there you have it. Now, getting back to this bill, Mr. Speaker, the Taxation, Annual Rates, Foreign Superannuation and Remedial Matters Bill, the main thing that I just want to draw attention to is there are 4 main proposals in this bill, and I just want to thank I will come to that. I just want to thank the members of the committee of FEC who have worked very collegially and hard on this bill. Quite complicated matters around foreign superannuation and the mining of specified minerals. We had a lot of detailed submissions, and we worked our way through it more or less in a collegial matter. And I do want to thank all members of the committee, and just mention that the changes to the tax of foreign superannuation are designed to make it simpler and fairer for both New Zealanders returning from having worked overseas and for migrants. And it's a difficult area. Where we've got to is it may not be perfect, but it's a lot better than where we were before, where we had a huge number, a very high percentage of those people who were not actually paying their tax and not even understanding where they had to go. And finally, bringing the tax treatment of mining of specified minerals such as gold, silver into line with general business tax principles is the way to go, and this bill achieves that. And so on that basis, Mr. Speaker, I commend it to the House.
Honourable Trevor Miller.
Mr. Speaker, a couple of points I want to make about previous speakers, and without getting into any detail about presence or absence of members. It used to be a tradition in this House that ministers, when they were making the first speech on a bill, would listen to the response, would be in the House listening to the response in order to be briefed by their officials and to work with their colleagues on the team. Mr. Speaker, I could tell that the Minister, Mr. Macleay, in charge of this bill, was not listening and communicating with later speakers on the legislation. And I think that's a pity, it's a loss, and because, Mr. Speaker, ministers used to think that the House took some priority for their time, and in fact there used to be a requirement for many more